Okay, we'll split up chapter 26 into two parts. We will do the first part's kind of the gross anatomy, and the second part will be just a little physiology, skeletals, and muscular systems. So, muscles interact with skeletons. How? Well, every muscle has to have a place to attach to. That's called the origin. And then it has to have a place that it attaches to on the bone that it moves. So we're looking at a biceps. Its attachment is up here on the scapula. That means that's the bone it doesn't move, and its insertion is down here on the radius and the ulna, and it basically flexes the muscle. Okay? The muscles and the bones work together to allow a point of origin for the muscle to exert pressure against. This is why when you break a bone, you can't move and utilize that muscle, because if the bone is broken, it can't get the attachment to be strong enough. Okay. Some different types of skeletons. We'll talk about a lot of them here. There's three of them: hydrostatic, exo, and endoskeletons. A hydrostatic skeleton is a fluid-filled cavity inside some muscle, usually smooth muscle, although occasionally skeletal muscle. A lot of invertebrates have hydrostatic skeletons, and what these do, they allow for the muscles to tighten up around this fluid-filled sac, okay, and exert pressure against it. So if they tighten up the turgor pressure of the fluid-filled sac, the hydrostatic skeleton, they can push against that because they can make it rigid enough to exert muscle force to move. Things that have hydrostatic skeletons: jellyfish, earthworms. Exoskeletons. These are typical. They're just a hard outer covering, and you find them in all the arthropods. Okay, and that's the most common place we find them. It is just there to protect an animal from outside. They have to periodically molt. They have to grow bigger, and when they do, they've got to shed the old exoskeleton and grow a new one. And that period of time between the old one and the new one, they're very, very susceptible to being predated upon because they don't have their defense. Because when they first molt, the exoskeleton hasn't hardened yet. An endoskeleton is the most efficient. It's internal, like this fish or humans. Grows with the animal. It weighs less than an exoskeleton, but the soft tissues are not as well protected. Although on the humans, there are a couple things that are kind of encased somewhat in cavities of bones that allow them to be a little bit more protected. In humans, there's two divisions of the skeletal system. There's the axial skeleton, and that's going to be the head, the spinal column, and the rib cage. Okay. The second group is called the, there we go. Let's go. The second group is called the appendicular skeleton. That's the bones in blue. And that is the pelvic girdle, which is down here, the two pelvis bones. The pectoral girdle, which is up here, that supports the two appendages of the arms. The pelvic girdle supports the two appendages of the legs. Okay? And that's your appendages, your appendicular skeleton. So you have the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The vertebral skeleton has a lot of different bones, and don't worry, you're not going to have to learn a whole lot of them. This isn't an anatomy and physiology class. Just a couple. Bones tend to be lightweight and strong because they're porous, and they have areas inside the bone that are empty. All right, and so it lightens up the bone. It's not nearly as heavy. Inside these cavities, we in most species have marrow, and we'll talk about marrow in a moment. Now, all of the bones in vertebrates like us start out as a cartilage model, and then they get ossified. To be ossified means you lay down bone matrix. So cartilage is converted into bone through a process called ossification. The shaft of a long bone contains the marrow cavity, and it can house red or yellow marrow. In this part, the long shaft of the bone, it is usually yellow marrow, which is just fat storage. Up in the heads of the bones, you will find red marrow. Red marrow in us makes blood cells. Okay. Bone cells actually secrete a hard matrix, and there's two components. There are collagen fibers and this stuff called hydroxyapatites. And let me see if I can type this in. Hydroxyapatites. And these minerals add rigidity, while the collagen adds flexibility. So collagen adds flexibility and the minerals add hardness and rigidity. Compact bone is hard and dense and is made up in these little things called osteons, whereas spongy bone is light and porous. And so you can see the solid compact bone here in these, what were the growth plates. We'll talk about those in a minute. But see all the little cavities in here, that's called spongy bone, and that's all overlaid with a layer of epithelial tissue or endothelial tissue actually because it's lining an internal cavity. And these in your skull make up what are called the sinuses. And so what happens in the spongy bone, for instance, in your skull, these endothelial tissues secrete fluid. And if you have an allergy or something and you secrete a bunch of fluid in your skull from the endothelial tissues, it will form little vacuums in the skull, and that's what leads to sinus headaches. So to alleviate a sinus headache, you can do two things. You lay down and tilt your head back so that these things will slowly drain of the fluid, and then you can take drugs that cause the endothelial tissues not to secrete fluid. And that will alleviate somewhat the pain. The vertebrate skeleton also has cartilage. Okay. And cartilage is covers like all the tips of the bones that articulate with each other. There is hyaline cartilage, that's the most common, and it basically is like a hard rubber coating on the ends of bones that articulate so that they don't wear down and cause little splinters or fragments of bone to break off. They attach, cartilage attaches the ribs here to the sternum. You've got cartilage on every joint. You have cartilage on the joints in your hands. You've got cartilage in between the different little bones of the vertebrae. Okay. Now, when you're born and as an embryo, you basically, as you go through the various stages, your bones are incompletely ossified. So when you're born, you still have a lot of cartilage, and that gives your bones a lot of flexibility, and that's very helpful. Little kids fall down, they bang themselves, they hurt themselves, and so having all of this cartilage helps those individuals survive. They can fall down and take a pounding and keep going. As a newborn, there's a tremendous amount. The soft spot on the skull is cartilage, and that cartilage in the skull helps birth because it allows your skull to contract a little as it's coming through the birth canal. As a child, you will have these growth plates, okay? And the growth plates will stay open, and this is how your bones get longer, etc. And if you go to, I think these will work. Let's see if these are valid. No, that one's no longer valid. Let me remove that hyperlink. All right. So I can't show this video, or this video will get blocked for copyright violations. But if you just right-click it, hit Open Hyperlink, you'll be able to view that little video, or you can, just do a search in YouTube for how do bones grow, and it will explain the process of these bones getting longer. Now, your growth plates, these epiphyseal plates, they seal at about 18 in males and 21 in females. So you keep growing until then. Some of the structures and functions. The functions of the skeleton: support, provides the body shape; movement, it gives muscles fixed places to push or pull against. It protects certain structures, like your heart is inside the rib cage behind the sternum, so it kind of protects it. Your spinal column is got a big series of bones wrapped around it to protect it. Blood cells. We don't have nuclei in our red blood cells, so we're constantly making new blood cells. And as we do that, and white blood cells, these are all made in the red marrow, which is usually in the ends of the big long bones. By long bones, we're talking the femur, the tibia, the fibula, the humerus, the radius, and the ulna. Bones are a reservoir for calcium. You have osteoclasts, osteoclast. These bones break down. If your blood level gets short on calcium ions, then you will take these little osteoclast cells and they will break down bone and dissolve it and release calcium ions into your bloodstream. You need a certain amount of calcium in your blood for various physiological processes. Now, as you get older, your bones will slowly start to break down, and osteoporosis is a condition in which the osteoclasts break down bone faster than osteoblasts can make new bone. It is a little more likely for females to get osteoporosis. Now, to increase the strength of your bone, etc., exercise, proper diet, and in some cases, certain hormone therapies can help increase the density of bone. Becoming inactive is a bad idea, especially as you get older. It will make it more and more difficult to maintain your bone density and your bone mass. Bone meets bone at a joint. A joint's just an area where two bones meet, and joints have little capsules of connective tissue and cartilage that reduce the friction. So here we've got this joint here, and the joint is a cavity filled with fluid. And the fluid is kind of thick, and as you start limbering up or warming up and it heats up, it becomes more thin, sort of like oil. Bands of connective tissue help stabilize movable joints. Ligaments connect bone to bone, tendons connect bone to muscle. And that's the first half of chapter 26.